Got a little different project today. We've got a sewing machine here that's in a cabinet that's not such a good cabinet. You slide this around, and then you're supposed to be able to get your legs under here. It's not very wide. It's a tight little space, and when you get both legs under there, the needle is offset to your left by about 8 inches or so, and you have to lean over to get a good view on the needle. And in a perfect world, in order to get situated right on the needle, you've got to straddle this leg here. So what we're going to do, it's a good little machine, but the cabinet is really not functional. We're going to take the top of this cabinet off, and we're going to build a base for it out of scraps that I've got in the shop so that it's a nice wide open space. But we're going to keep this same top because we don't want to have to make a new one. We're going to reuse this and just get rid of the bottom. These are the materials that we're going to use to make the base for the sewing machine. These 2x4s here were part of a kayak rack that a gentleman had in his garage to string his kayaks up with, and he gave those to me. I've had those for a while. This long 2x4 has been in my garage for 4 years, just waiting for a project to come along. I'm going to use it. These pieces here were part of a bed rail that I had made a bed rail for a college kid to use in an apartment. And it actually came up about 5 inches high on this side, but I've already trimmed that off and used it for something else. And I just hung on to these. These will be the stringers for our legs on the base of the sewing machine. These pieces of pine here, you can see how warped these are. They're warped and crooked. They got so many knots in them, there's just not a lot I can do with them. I've had these 3 pieces of wood for the better part of 9 years now, just waiting on a project to come along. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this lower end where they're straight and flat, throw the rest of it away. This was going to be the seat on a bench that I haven't built yet. You can see it's cupped just a little bit, so I can't use it for much of anything else. But I've had this again for 9 years, and I haven't made that bench yet. So I'm going to use this for the sides on the base of the sewing machine. This is all scraps that's been laying around in my wood shop. I'm going to put them to good use. You need a good circle for a corner. Use the disc, use the pad on your rotary sander. Look at there. Now we'll just sand back to the line. Stayed on it pretty good. We'll sand back to the line. We'll be good to go. This is what it's going to look like. Of course, it's flipped over. Basically, we're going to put it together with pocket screws. Nothing too fancy. Again, this is just a utility piece. Not really worried about it looking all fancy. What I like to call scrap wood, square wood, and that's what it's going to be. Pocket hole screws will get it all put together. We are going to trim just a little bit off these legs. They're just a little bit heavy looking, so I'm going to thin them down just a little bit. But other than that, that's pretty much what it's going to look like. And we're in it all total about 35 minutes. So that's not too bad. Here's how it looks so far, and I don't think I'm going to put any stretchers on it. The side span from front to back is pretty narrow, so it doesn't need anything. And the back, it's real sturdy going from side to side. It's not racking at all, so I'm not going to put any stretchers on it. I'm going to leave it just like it is. You can see where we thinned out those 2x4 legs too. They look a little bit better. Put a little bit of a taper on it. I came 9 inches down from the top and made a mark, and then 2 inches across at the bottom and made a mark. Connected the two and cut it out. And that's the taper that we've got. Now remember, this is not supposed to be a real pretty piece. This is a utility piece. As long as it holds up that sewing machine top like we want it to, we're going to be happy. Let me give you a shot of what those pocket holes look like. There's the pocket hole screw. That's a really tight joint, and this is going to be together for a long time. Let's get the top now and set it on it and see how it looks. Alright, here's how our table looks with the top attached. And I used the same pocket hole screws to attach the top to the base as I did when I was putting the base together. You can see I've got 2 over there on that side. I've got 2 more here on this side. And then there's 4 just like they're here on the front as well. Now this tabletop on the original sewing base would fold over. But on this one it's fastened tight, so the hinge no longer works. And the tabletop is fastened down straight all the way across, tight to the base. And this little tray here was on the inside of the door, and I've mounted it inside these legs. That's where you put your scissors and your bobbins and your sewing thread and stuff like that. Turned out pretty well. We don't have a lot of time in this. Most of the time was spent on the finish. We've got 3 coats of Minwax polyacrylic on it. And again, that was most of the time on the project, was sanding between coats and waiting for it to dry. But I'll set it down here on the floor so you can get a better look at it. sewing machine is now mounted back on the table, and I think it looks right at home. You might remember this was all scrap wood, and we made what I call a scrap wood square wood base for it. And we used the original top that was on the cabinet that came with this sewing machine. This thing was built back in 1968, so it's an old sewing machine, and it weighs about 40 pounds. And I believe this scrap wood table base is going to suit it well for another 50 years or so. But anytime you build a table, the test is to put the level on it and see how level you got it. So let's zoom in on that bubble and see how we did on this table. I think that looks pretty good. I don't think I could get it any closer than that. This sewing machine is set now. It'll go another 50 years. And I believe this table is probably going to outlast me.